Admiral Ketvar stood on the bridge of the orbital command station, her 6 arms clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display with growing unease. The unknown vessel had been detected 3 hours ago at the edge of their solar system, moving at velocities that should have been impossible. Their most advanced scanners could barely track it. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority earned through 40 years of military service. Commander Zeftai's tentacles danced across the console with nervous energy. The craft maintains a steady approach vector towards Zalani Prime. Current velocity suggests arrival in approximately 6 standard hours. All attempts at long-range scanning have been unsuccessful. Ketvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Zalani Confederacy possessed the most sophisticated military technology in this sector of the galaxy. Their planetary shield network had repelled 3 separate invasions over the past century. Yet this single ship rendered their sensors nearly useless. Communications array status? Fully operational, Admiral. The vessel appears to be monitoring our transmissions, but has not responded to any hails. Through the observation deck's crystalline windows, Zalani Prime hung below them like a jewel against a void. 50 billion souls call that world home, protected by an interconnected network of shield generators that could withstand bombardment from entire fleets. The sight should have been comforting. Instead, Ketvar felt a cold dread settling in her thorax. "Sir," Zeftai's voice carried a tremor, "the vessel has just decelerated to sublight speeds. It's moving through the outer perimeter without triggering any alarms." Impossible. Their sensor nets extended far beyond the orbit of their outermost moon. Nothing moved through Zalani space undetected. Ketvar moved to primary console, her multiple eyes focusing on the readings that made no sense. Magnify Sector 77 Alpha. The main screen flickered, then displayed a view of empty space. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Then reality seemed to shimmer, and a vessel materialized as if stepping out from behind an invisible curtain. The ship was sleek and impossibly elegant, its hull reflecting starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It measured perhaps 2 kilometers in length, dwarfed by Zalani battleships, but radiating an aura of barely contained power that made Ketvar's skin crawl. "Admiral." The communications officer's voice cracked with tension. "We're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. Put it through." The bridge fell silent as a new voice filled the space. It spoke in perfect Zalani, with pronunciation so flawless it could have come from a native speaker, yet carried undertones that suggested something fundamentally different about the vocal apparatus producing it. "Greetings, Zalani Confederacy. This is Captain Sarah Chun aboard the human vessel Endeavor. We come in peace and request permission to establish diplomatic contact." The word human sent ripples of shock through the bridge crew. Humans were legends, stories told by traders from the Galactic Rim about a species that had vanished into the void centuries ago. Most scholars consider them myth. Ketvar found her voice. "Unknown vessel Endeavor. This is Admiral Ketvar of the Zalani Defense Command. You have entered restricted space without authorization. State your intentions and submit to inspection." A pause. Then something that might have been laughter. "Admiral, we appreciate your position, but I'm afraid inspection won't be necessary. We've already completed our scans of your fascinating defensive network. Quite impressive for your technological level." Heat flushed through Ketvar's body. The condescension in that voice was unmistakable. "Captain Chun, you'll submit to our protocols or be classified as hostile. I understand your concern, Admiral. Perhaps a demonstration would help establish the parameters of our relationship." Before Ketvar could respond, every console on the bridge erupted in warning signals. The tactical display showed impossible readings as the planetary shield network began powering down section by section. "What's happening?" Ketvar barked. Zeftai's tentacles flew over his controls in panic. "The shields are deactivating. All primary generators are going offline in sequence. I'm reading massive power fluctuations across the entire grid. Override it. Emergency protocols." "I'm trying. The system isn't responding to command inputs. It's as if something else has assumed control." On the main screen, Zalani Prime hung naked and vulnerable against the stars. The protective barrier that had guarded their world for generations flickered and died like a candle in wind. Captain Chen's voice returned, calm and conversational. Your planetary defense grid is truly remarkable, Admiral. The integration between your orbital platforms and surface installations shows genuine engineering brilliance. We've made some minor adjustments to improve efficiency, but overall, quite impressive work. Kefvar stared at the readings in disbelief. Their most classified military systems have been penetrated and controlled as easily as a child's toy. How? She whispered. Admiral, we've been monitoring galactic development for quite some time. Your species shows tremendous promise. We'd very much like to discuss matters of mutual interest. Would you be willing to arrange a meeting? The bridge remained frozen in stunned silence. Outside, their mighty shields remained dark, controlled by a force they couldn't comprehend or resist. What do you want? Kefvar asked, her voice barely steady. To talk, Admiral. Simply to talk. And perhaps to share some perspectives on the direction galactic civilization seems to be heading. I think you'll find our conversation quite illuminating. 3 hours later, Kefvar stood in the main conference hall of Zilani Prime's capital spire, surrounded by the Confederacy's highest-ranking officials. Emergency sessions have been called across every governmental body, military command structure, and scientific institute. The impossible had happened, and nobody knew how to respond. The human ship sat in stationary orbit above their world, having made no aggressive moves beyond its casual demonstration of technological superiority. Their shields remained offline, controlled by systems they couldn't access or understand. Every attempt to regain control had failed. The implications are staggering. Director Vasham of the Science Directorate was saying, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid sequence. If they can override our shields with such ease, what else can they control? Our power grids? Our communication networks? Our life support systems? Chancellor Mordek, the Confederacy's highest civilian authority, gestured with 2 of her arms while the other manipulated a holographic display. We need to consider the possibility that this is an invasion fleet, one ship as an advanced scout, followed by a force we couldn't hope to resist. Then why the diplomatic overtures? Asked General Cathwin of the Army Command. If they possess such overwhelming technological advantage, why not simply take what they want? Admiral Kefvar had been wondering the same thing. The human Captain Chun had requested a face-to-face meeting to be conducted aboard her vessel. Standard protocol demanded such meetings occur on neutral ground, but with their planetary defenses compromised, standard protocol seemed woefully inadequate. Admiral, Chancellor Mordek turned to her. Your assessment? Kefvar stood, her reflection multiplied in the chamber's polished surfaces. Their demonstration was precise and controlled. They could have caused catastrophic damage to our infrastructure, but chose restraint. The shield override appears to be completely reversible. I believe they're attempting to establish a position of strength for negotiations while avoiding unnecessary destruction. Or they're toying with us. General Cathwin interjected. Predators often play with their prey before the killing blow. Director Vasham's tentacles writhed with agitation. Our historical records mention humans sporadically. Ancient trade documents, fragmentary reports from the Outer Rim. Most scholars dismiss them as legend or confuse accounts of other species. If these are truly humans, where have they been for the past 3 centuries? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Kefvar had accessed every database, consulted with their most knowledgeable xenobiologists and historians. The consensus was unsettling. Humans had simply vanished from galactic civilization sometime around 300 standard years ago. No explanation, no gradual decline, no evidence of catastrophe. They had been active participants in interstellar trade and diplomacy, and then they were gone. Captain Shin specifically mentioned monitoring galactic development. Kefvar said, this suggests they've been watching us, studying our progress while remaining hidden. To what end? Chancellor Mordek's voice carried the weight of 50 billion lives, depending on her decisions. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication system activated. The voice that emerged sent chills through everyone present. Good afternoon, esteemed leaders of the Zilani Confederacy. This is Captain Chun. I apologize for the interruption, but time is becoming a factor. Security officers immediately began scanning for intrusions, but Kefar already knew they'd find nothing. If humans could override their planetary shields, infiltrating their communication networks would be trivial. Captain Chun, Chancellor Mordek managed, this is a closed governmental session. Your breach of our security constitutes an act of aggression. Chancellor, with respect, your security was never breached. We're simply using the communication protocols you've already established with our vessel. However, I understand your concern. Perhaps I can provide some context that will help clarify our situation. The chamber fell silent. Director Vashem activated recording systems, while General Kathwin signaled for military alerts to be raised throughout the system. 300 years ago, humanity withdrew from galactic civilization. We had reached a point where continued participation in the existing power structures was no longer beneficial to our development or the development of other species. We established observation posts and monitoring stations throughout the galaxy to track progress and watch for certain specific developments. What developments? Kefvar asked. The emergence of what we term threshold civilizations. Species that have reached sufficient technological and social sophistication to become either significant contributors to galactic progress or significant threats to galactic stability. Chancellor Mordek's mandibles clicked nervously. And you consider the Zalani Confederacy to be approaching this threshold? You've already crossed it, Chancellor. The question is which direction you'll choose to go from here. The implication struck the room like a physical blow. General Kathwin leaned forward, his military bearing rigid with tension. Are you threatening us? Quite the opposite, General. We're offering you a choice. The galaxy is approaching a critical juncture. Several species have developed technologies that could reshape interstellar civilization. Some have chosen paths that benefit everyone. Others have chosen paths that benefit only themselves, often at the expense of less advanced species. Director Vasham's eyes blinked in rapid patterns. You're saying there are others like you? Other species with capabilities beyond current galactic norms. The universe is vast and old, Director. Humanity is not unique in having transcended the limitations that currently define galactic civilization. However, we may be unique in our approach to managing that transcendence. Admiral Kefvar felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. You're recruiting us. A pause that felt like an eternity. Admiral, you have remarkable insight. Yes, in a sense, we are, but recruitment implies a hierarchy that doesn't exist in the relationship we're offering. We're inviting you to join a community of species that have chosen to use their capabilities to foster growth rather than domination. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations between officials. Chancellor Mordek raised her arms for silence. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Chun? A demonstration, Chancellor, not of our ability to control your technology, but of what becomes possible when civilizations choose cooperation over competition. However, this demonstration will require trust on your part. Specifically, it will require representatives of your government to come aboard our vessel. The request hung in the air like a death sentence. Board an alien ship whose capabilities they couldn't comprehend, operated by a species that had just proven their defenses were meaningless. And if we refuse? General Kathwin asked. Then we respect your choice, restore your shields to full functionality, and depart. You'll never see us again. However, you'll also never know what possibilities you've chosen to reject. Admiral Kefvar looked around the chamber at faces filled with fear, uncertainty, and desperate curiosity. The weight of decision pressed down on them, all like the gravity of a dying star. The shuttle bay aboard the human vessel Endeavor defied every principle of engineering Kefvar thought she understood. The space was impossibly vast, its walls seeming to stretch beyond the ship's exterior dimensions. Soft light emanated from surfaces that looked solid but felt different under her feet, as if the deck itself was alive and responsive. She had volunteered to lead the delegation, despite Chancellor Mordek's protests. 4 others accompanied her. Director Vasham from the Science Directorate, Cultural Attaché Yelnara, Security Chief Thakran, and Communications Specialist Vexhai. All of them moved with the careful tension of prey animals entering a predator's den. Their shuttle had been guided in by invisible forces. their pilot reporting that his controls had simply stopped responding once they entered the Endeavor's docking bay. Yet the landing had been gentle as falling snow, smoother than anything their most advanced technology could achieve. "Welcome aboard," came a voice from everywhere and nowhere. "Captain Chin will meet you shortly. Please don't be alarmed by anything you see or experience. Our ship operates on principles that may seem unusual to you." The air itself shimmered, and suddenly they were no longer in the shuttle bay, but standing in what appeared to be a garden. Real trees stretched overhead, their leaves rustling in a breeze that carried the scent of growing things. A stream bubbled nearby, its water crystal clear over smooth stones. Director Vasham's scanner beeped frantically in his hands. "Impossible," he whispered. "My readings show we're still inside a starship, but my other senses register a natural environment. The atmospheric composition is perfect, the temperature ideal, the gravity precisely adjusted to our comfort levels. Welcome to our observation deck." They turned as one to see a figure approaching along a path that definitely hadn't been there moments before. Captain Sarah Chun was smaller than Kethvar had expected, perhaps 1.5 meters tall, with skin the color of polished bronze and dark hair that caught the light in ways that seemed almost metallic. She wore no uniform, just simple clothing that seemed to shift color slightly as she moved. But her eyes were what held Kethvar's attention. They were deep brown, almost black, and held depths that spoke of experiences spanning centuries. This was not the gaze of someone who counted years in decades. "Captain Chun," Kethvar managed, inclining her head in the formal greeting of equals. "Admiral Kethvar, your reputation precedes you. The defense of Kalani Station against the Mordak horde was studied in our tactical academies for its innovative use of sensor shadows." The casual mention of a classified military engagement from 20 years ago sent cold ripples through the delegation. Their most secret operations were apparently common knowledge to these humans. "Please sit." Chin gestured to seating that materialized from the ground itself, perfectly sized and positioned for each delegate's anatomy. "I know this must be overwhelming. Our technology operates on principles your science hasn't discovered yet, but that doesn't make it magic, simply more advanced." Cultural attaché Yelnara found her voice first. "Captain Chun, our records indicate that humans participated in galactic civilization for approximately 2 centuries before vanishing. What happened to your species?" Chin settled into her own chair with fluid grace. "We evolved attaché, both technologically and socially. At some point, we realized that the competitive paradigm driving most galactic civilizations was ultimately self-limiting. Species would develop to a certain point, then plateau or destroy themselves through conflict over resources. So you withdrew," Security Chief Thakran said, suspicion clear in his tone. "We transformed. Withdrawal implies retreat. Chief, what we did was more akin to metamorphosis. We had reached a point where our continued presence in the existing galactic power structure was hindering rather than helping overall development." Director Vasham leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "The energy requirements for your demonstrated capabilities should be massive. Where does the power come from?" Chin smiled, and for a moment looked entirely human despite the impossible surroundings. "Director, your species is perhaps 50 years away from discovering what you'll probably call quantum vacuum energy extraction. Once mastered, energy becomes essentially unlimited. Matter manipulation follows from there, then consciousness integration with quantum systems." The words were meaningless to Kethvar, but Director Vasham's 4 eyes widened in shocked recognition. "You're describing technologies that our theoretical physicists consider impossible." "Your theoretical physicists are thinking too small," Chin replied gently. "The universe is far stranger and more accommodating than current galactic science believes. But that's not why you're here." She stood, and the garden around them began to change. The trees dissolved into starlight. The stream became flowing energy, and suddenly they were standing in space itself, surrounded by a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. This is the current state of galactic civilization. Points of light began to glow throughout the display. Each light represents a species that has achieved interstellar capability. Colors indicate technological development level, with red being the most advanced by current standards. Most of the lights were yellow or green, Perhaps a dozen glowed red, including one near their current location that Kethvar realized must represent the Zilani Confederacy. Now, this is what we project will happen over the next century if current trends continue. The map transformed. Many of the lights went dark. The remaining red lights had grown brighter, while consuming the space around them. Large areas of the galaxy showed no illumination at all. Resource wars, communications specialist Vexhai said softly. The advanced civilizations will consume the resources needed by developing species. Exactly. Competition for finite resources leads to conflict, which leads to the destruction or absorption of less capable civilizations. Eventually, you're left with a few massive empires controlling dead space. Chin gestured, and the map changed again. This time, the lights remained stable, but new colors appeared. Blue lights began to connect red ones in complex patterns, while green and yellow lights brightened gradually. This represents the alternative. Instead of competition, cooperation. Instead of consumption, cultivation. Advanced civilizations help developing ones reach their potential while discovering new possibilities through collaboration. Admiral Kethvar stared at the display, understanding the implications. You're asking us to choose between conquering our neighbors or helping them grow. I'm asking you to consider which future you want to live in, Admiral, and to understand that the choice you make will determine not just your species' fate, but the fate of every civilization in your local sector. The weight of responsibility settled on Kethvar's shoulders like a mountain. Around her, the delegation stood in stunned silence, facing a decision that would reshape their understanding of existence itself. Chen's voice grew softer, almost regretful. I should also mention that you're not the first species we've approached with this choice. Some have chosen cooperation. Others have chosen domination. Those who choose domination typically discover that they're not as advanced as they believed. The threat was delivered so gently it took several seconds to register. When it did, Security Chief Thakran's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. I wouldn't, Chin said without looking at him. Your weapon won't function aboard our ship, Chief. But more importantly, threats aren't necessary. We don't force compliance. We simply ensure that species who choose to be predators understand they're not alone in the galaxy. Director Vasham's voice shook slightly. What happens to civilizations that choose domination? Chen's expression grew sad. They discover that the universe is much larger and more dangerous than they imagined, usually right before they cease to exist. The return journey to Zilani Prime passed in tense silence. Each member of the delegation stared out at the stars, processing implications that threatened to shatter their understanding of reality. Admiral Kethvar found herself wondering if ignorance might have been preferable to the knowledge they now carried. Captain Chen had shown them more than galactic maps and theoretical futures. She had revealed the existence of the collective, an alliance of species that had transcended the limitations of traditional civilization. Worlds where scarcity was extinct, where death was optional, where consciousness could exist in forms that defied biological constraints. But she had also shown them the consumed sectors, vast regions of space where aggressive civilizations had expanded until they encountered something that made their technology look like stone tools. The silence in those regions wasn't empty. It was a silence of species that had learned too late that predators eventually encounter apex predators. Admiral. Director Vasham's voice was hollow with exhaustion. The energy manipulation we witnessed aboard their vessel. If my calculations are correct, they're accessing power sources equivalent to stellar output. Security Chief Thakran looked up from his tactical analysis. Their ship's true size is impossible to determine. The interior spaces we explored exceeded the vessel's exterior dimensions by factors I can't quantify. They've mastered spatial manipulation at levels that make our defensive capabilities irrelevant. Cultural attaché Yelnara had been silent for most of the journey, but now she spoke with the voice of someone who had glimpsed the divine. The consciousness integration Captain Chun described. They've achieved individual immortality while maintaining collective identity. Death becomes a choice rather than inevitability. Communications specialist Vexhai's report was perhaps the most disturbing. Their monitoring systems have been observing galactic civilizations for centuries. Every major political development, every technological breakthrough, every military engagement. They possess complete intelligence on every species in our sector. The shuttle touched down at Zolani Prime's primary spaceport as dawn broke over the capital city. 50 billion souls went about their daily lives, unaware that their civilization stood at a crossroads that would determine whether their children would inherit the stars or find themselves consumed by darkness. The emergency session convened within an hour of their return. The Confederacy's leadership gathered in the same chamber, where they had first heard Captain Chen's voice, but now the weight of decision pressed down with crushing intensity. Chancellor Mordek called for immediate reports. As Admiral Kethvar described their experience aboard the human vessel, she watched faces transform from skepticism to fear to something approaching despair. The technology gap is insurmountable, General Cathwin concluded after reviewing the tactical data. If they chose to conquest our territories, we couldn't offer meaningful resistance. Our most advanced weapons would be irrelevant against their capabilities. But they're offering partnership instead of conquest, Director Vasham pointed out. The scientific knowledge they could share would advance our civilization by centuries within decades. At what cost? Demanded Representative Zoctow from the outer colonies. They're asking us to abandon our sovereignty, to subordinate our development to their vision of galactic evolution. Chancellor Mordek raised her arms for silence. Admiral Kethvar, your assessment of their intentions? Kethvar had been dreading this question. I believe Captain Chen was completely honest about their offer. They genuinely want to help species develop beyond the limitations of resource-based competition. However, I also believe she was honest about the consequences of refusing their offer. Meaning that civilizations which choose expansion through conquest eventually encounter resistance they cannot overcome. The humans aren't the only transcendent species in the galaxy. They're simply the ones willing to offer alternatives before applying consequences. The chamber fell silent as the full implications settled. They weren't just choosing between cooperation and competition. They were choosing between evolution and extinction. Representative Morthau from the Industrial Consortium stood. What guarantees do we have? How do we know they won't simply absorb us once we're dependent on their technology? We don't, Kethvar replied honestly. But the alternative is to continue on our current path, which leads inevitably to conflict with neighbors, resource depletion, and eventual encounter with species that view us as competitors to be eliminated. Director Vasham activated a holographic display, showing their current territorial expansion patterns. Our models predict we'll need to acquire additional systems within 50 years to support population growth and resource demands. That means displacing or subjugating less advanced civilizations, which puts us on the path toward becoming exactly the kind of predatory species the humans described. Cultural attaché Yelna added quietly. General Cathwin's military training warred with the evidence before him. There has to be a third option, some way to maintain our independence while avoiding the fate Chen described. General, Kethvar said gently, they've been monitoring galactic development for 3 centuries. If there was a third path, they would know about it. The debate continued for hours, but Kethvar could see the inevitable conclusion approaching. Fear, pragmatism, and hope were aligning despite their leadership's instinctive resistance to subordination. Finally, Chancellor Mordek called for preliminary vote, all in favor of opening formal negotiations with the human collective. Hands and tentacles and appendages rose around the chamber. The count was decisive, if not unanimous. Motion carries. Admiral Kethvar, you will return to the human vessel with authorization to negotiate terms of partnership. As the session adjourned, Kethvar remained in her seat, staring at the chamber's empty space. In a few hours, she would return to the impossible ship that had casually demonstrated their vulnerability. She would speak for her entire civilization, committing them to a path that would transform everything they had ever known. Her personal communicator chimed. The message was brief and unsigned, but she recognized the impossible intrusion into their secure networks. Admiral, we appreciate your leadership during these discussions. Please inform the Chancellor that we're prepared to begin with small demonstrations of technological cooperation, allowing your people to adapt gradually to new possibilities. The universe is vast enough for patience. Despite everything, Kethvar smiled. Captain Chen was still listening. still offering reassurance even as she fundamentally altered the course of Zolani civilization. Outside the chamber windows, their planet's shields remained dark, held in the gentle grip of forces beyond their understanding. Soon, those same forces would lift them toward possibilities they had never dared to imagine. Outside the chamber windows, their planet's shields remained dark, held in the gentle grip of forces beyond their understanding. Soon, those same forces would lift them toward possibilities they had never dared to imagine. 6 months later, Admiral Kethvar stood in what had once been the Zolani Confederacy's primary military command center. The room buzzed with activity, but the technology filling it would have been incomprehensible to her just months ago. Holographic displays showed real-time data from across their sector, but now that data included civilizations they had never known existed. The transformation had begun slowly. Captain Chin had been true to her word about gradual adaptation. The first gift had been medical technology that eliminated genetic diseases overnight. The second had been agriculture enhancement that ended hunger on a dozen worlds. The third had been communication systems that allowed instantaneous contact across interstellar distances. Each advancement had come with education, with human teachers who patiently explained principles that stretched Zolani understanding to its limits. But more importantly, each advancement had come with opportunities to help other species achieve similar breakthroughs. Admiral Director Vasham approached, his appearance noticeably different from 6 months ago. The cellular regeneration technology had not only extended his lifespan, but restored his youth. He moved with energy that belonged to someone a fraction of his actual age. The Kethmori delegation has arrived. Kethvar nodded, reviewing the files in her consciousness-enhanced memory. The Kethmori Collective was a cluster of 7 systems populated by insectoid species known for their aggressive expansionism. 3 months ago, they had been Confederacy's primary military concern. Now they were about to receive the same choice that had transformed Zolani civilization. Their response to our initial contact? Suspicious but curious. Their military commanders are demanding proof of our claimed capabilities. Their scientists are fascinated by the technological samples we shared. Through the command center's enhanced windows, Kethvar could see the Kethmori battle fleet hanging in space beyond Zolani Prime's restored shields. 12 massive warships, each one capable of devastating entire worlds. 6 months ago, such a force would have terrified her. Now she felt only compassion for beings who still believed that military might determine civilizational survival. The Kethmori delegation entered the chamber with the rigid bearing of professional warriors. Their chitinous armor gleamed under the lights, and their compound eyes swept the room with tactical assessment. Queen General Vashka's mandibles clicked rapidly as she activated her personal communicator. The reports from her fleet commanders confirmed what the displays showed. Their most powerful warships had been rendered helpless without a single shot being fired. "Impossible," she whispered, then louder. "Your weapons did not target our vessels. Our sensors detected no energy discharges. Because no weapons were used, Queen General, we simply adjusted the quantum resonance frequencies of your reactor cores, a temporary modification that can be reversed instantly." Chun gestured, and the fleet displays showed power levels returning to normal across all Kethmori ships. "Your vessels are fully operational again." The demonstration's implications crashed over the delegation like a tsunami. Admiral Kethvar watched Vashka's worldview crumble in real time as she realized that everything she understood about warfare had become obsolete. "What do you want?" Vashka asked, her voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "The same thing we wanted from the Zolani Confederacy," Chin replied, "to offer you a choice. Your species has reached a threshold. You can continue expanding through conquest, eventually encountering forces that will treat you as you've treated others. Or you can join a community dedicated to lifting all civilizations toward their potential." Director Vasham stepped forward, his youthful appearance drawing surprised looks from the Kethmori delegation. "Queen General, 6 months ago we faced the same decision. We chose cooperation. The results speak for themselves." He activated a holographic display showing Zolani space. The 7 systems of their original territory had expanded to include dozens of previously unknown civilizations, all connected by streams of shared resources and technology. Our population growth has stabilized through abundance rather than expansion. Our lifespan has tripled. Our understanding of the universe has expanded beyond anything we thought possible, and we've helped 16 other species achieve similar breakthroughs. Vashka stared at the display, her compound eyes reflecting calculations and possibilities. The civilizations you've contacted, do they all choose cooperation? Chen's expression grew sad. No. Approximately 30% choose to continue their expansion patterns. They typically survive another 50 to 70 years before encountering something that views them as we view bacteria. Something like you? Sometimes. More often, something that makes us look primitive. The universe is vast, Queen General, and age brings capabilities that transcend normal understanding. Predatory civilizations eventually encounter apex predators. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of advanced technology. Kethvar watched Vashka process the same impossible choice that had transformed her own people's destiny. If we choose cooperation, Vashka said slowly, what happens to our military traditions, our warrior culture? Chin smiled. They evolve. The Zilani have become some of the finest peacekeepers in this sector, using their military expertise to protect developing civilizations from exploitation. Your strategic brilliance could serve similar purposes on a galactic scale. And if we refuse, then you continue on your current path. We won't interfere directly, but we also won't protect you from the consequences of that choice. Vashka's forearms moved in patterns that Kethvar recognized as deep contemplation. Finally, she spoke. I must consult with the collective council. This decision affects our entire species. Of course, take the time you need. We've waited centuries to make these offers. We can wait a few more days. As the Kethmori delegation departed, Kethvar found herself alone with Captain Chun. The human looked out at the stars with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of eternity. Do you ever regret giving us this choice? Kethvar asked. Chin turned to her with a smile that was entirely human despite everything she represented. Admiral, regret implies wishing things were different. I've learned that the universe tends toward complexity and consciousness despite all obstacles. Sometimes that process needs guidance, but it never needs force. And the civilizations that choose poorly, they serve as examples to others. Even extinction teaches lessons, though we prefer those lessons not be necessary. Through the enhanced windows, Kethvar could see the Kethmori fleet beginning to maneuver for departure. In a few days, they would return with an answer that would determine the fate of 7 star systems and billions of lives. Captain, she said quietly, what comes after this? After a civilization chooses cooperation and begins to transcend its limitations. Chen's eyes took on depths that spoke of experiences beyond mortal comprehension. Then the real journey begins. Admiral, the universe is infinite. Consciousness is eternal, and there are always new forms of existence to explore. Some species choose to become gardeners of reality itself. Others become explorers of dimensions that don't yet have names. A few become teachers, helping younger civilizations face the same choices you faced. And humans? What did you choose? All of the above, Jim replied with a laugh that contained centuries of wonder. We discovered that transcendence isn't a destination, Admiral. It's a way of traveling. As Captain Chun faded from view, returning to her impossible ship, Kethvar remained at the windows watching the stars. 6 months ago, she had been a military officer in a resource-limited civilization facing inevitable conflict with its neighbors. Now she was a guardian helping other species navigate the transition from scarcity to abundance, from competition to cooperation. The Kethmori would make their choice in a few days. Other civilizations would follow, each facing the same fundamental decision that had transformed the Zilani Confederacy from conquerors into cultivators. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, ancient intelligences watched and waited, ready to offer guidance to those who chose growth over consumption, ready to demonstrate consequences to those who chose otherwise. The universe was infinite. Consciousness was eternal, and the journey toward transcendence had only just begun. Led them, her forearms bearing ceremonial weapons that could probably level city blocks. Admiral Kethvar, Vashka's translated voice carried the harmonics of authority. Your messages spoke of technological cooperation. Your fleet positioning suggests preparation for conflict. Kethvar smiled, understanding confusion. To eyes trained in traditional military doctrine, the presence of human vessels throughout the system would indeed suggest hostile intent. But the Endeavor and its sister ships weren't positioned for battle. They were positioned for demonstration. Queen General, we extend the same offer that was made to us 6 months ago. The choice between competition and cooperation, between consumption and cultivation. Your people were weak, Vashka replied bluntly. The Kethmori Collective has conquered 17 systems through superior military doctrine. We do not require cooperation to expand our territories. Before Kethvar could respond, the chamber's atmosphere shifted. The familiar shimmer of spatial manipulation announced Captain Chen's arrival, though she materialized from seemingly empty air rather than walking through doors. The Kethmori delegation immediately assumed defensive positions, weapons appearing in hands with practiced speed. Chun regarded them with the same patient expression Kethvar remembered from their first meeting. Queen General Vashka, your reputation as a military strategist is well-deserved. The siege of Kelvera Station was particularly innovative in its use of orbital mechanics. The casual reference to classified Kethmori military operations had the expected effect. Vashka's compound eyes focused entirely on Chun, recognizing the implications of such detailed knowledge. You are the human Captain Chun, your species that claims technological superiority over established galactic powers. Claims. Chen's eyebrows rose in what might have been amusement. Queen General, perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than claims. Without warning, every screen in the command center switched to external views of the Kethmori battle fleet. The massive warships hung in space exactly as they had moments before, but something was fundamentally different. Your flagship's reactor output has been reduced to minimum levels, Chen explained conversationally. Life support remains fully operational, but weapons and propulsion systems are temporarily unavailable. The same modifications have been applied to your entire fleet. Vashka #they hailed a human ship. It responded by overriding their planet's shields.